Zoning Board of Adjustment. I'm sorry. Okay, I hereby declare the Long Hill Township Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting for January 4th, 2022 to order, call to order at 7:34 p.m. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting a copy of the public meeting date on the municipal bulletin board and website, by sending a copy to the Echo Sentinel and Courier News newspapers, and by filing a copy with the municipal clerk. Standard board procedures. Any hearing conducted by the board is a quasi-judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Meeting cutoff. Announcement is made that as a matter of procedure, it is the intention of the Zoning Board of Adjustment not to continue any matter past 10:30 p.m. at any regular or special meeting of the board, unless the motion is passed by the members then present to extend the meeting to a later specified cutoff time. Pledge of Allegiance. Brian, would you lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Brian. Roll call.
Yes. Did Mr. Aronio join us yet? No.
I don't see him.
Okay.
Let me give him another call.
Okay, Mr. Giannakis.
It's still muted, Gary.
Thanks for unmuting me. Here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Groskopf.
Did you get on?
Present.
Mr. Malloy is excused tonight. Mr. Rosenberg.
Okay, all right. We're taking attendance, so you hopefully you'll get on there before you finish. Did you read everything? Did you listen to all the prior meetings? Okay, great. You'll have to say that.
Mr. Rosenberg,
That's
you
okay.
said here, right?
It was a while ago for all of us, so just say it on the record, okay? All right, bye.
Mr. Hain.
Here.
Ms. Robertson is okay. Ms. Robertson is excused tonight. Vice Chairman Johnson.
Here.
Chairman Correct.
Here, and Jerry is trying to get on by his phone, so.
Okay.
In the meantime, we can just do the one variance that we have that we are supposed to hear tonight. It was carried from 12/21/21. It was to be heard tonight, but I hear there was a issue with the architect being out of the country. Not just in Florida, he was actually out of the country.
Correct.
All right, so that's block 13404, lot 1.04, zone R2, 35 Morristown Road, application number 21-19Z, Chris Keza. Applicant proposes to construct an exterior staircase from the basement level at the rear of the yard of a single-family resident. Lot coverage variance is requested. Do I hear? He's requested that his variance application be carried to January 18th, 2022. Do I hear a motion to carry the variance? Do we need any notice or not?
No, that's
No.
Mr. Chairman, without further notice, 7:30 p.m. remote.
Fine. So do I hear a motion to carry it to January 18th, 2022 without any further notice and by way of Zoom?
So moved.
Okay.
Pick one.
Take your name as a second. All right.
Let the record show that Mr. Aronio has joined the meeting.
Great. All right. I knew if we stalled long enough, he'd be here.
Thank you, Ed. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Jerry. Okay, everybody in favor of the motion?
Yes.
Aye.
No.
Okay, good. It is so moved to January 18th, 2022, and hopefully there's no further technical difficulties and everybody's within the United States or thereby, or somewhere where they're really going to computer.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I could just ask Deborah to make sure we have an extension of time in writing from the applicant through the end of the month of January if we don't already.
I will get that. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you, Steve. Thank you. Okay, next thing up, we have a use variance and preliminary final site plan approval. Carried from May 4th, 2021, May 18th, 2021, July 6th, 2021, September 7th, 2021, October 5th, 2021, November 16th, 2021, and December 21st, 2021. I think this one holds the record. Block 116006, lots 17 and 18, Zone B-1-5, known as 224-226 and 230 Main Avenue. Application number 21-03Z. It's 224230 Main Street LLC. Applicant proposes to merge the existing two lots and construct a 3-story mixed-use building. Is the applicant here and ready? Fred.
I am here, yes.
Fred, you're muted.
Darn it.
I think you sound better that way, Fred, but that's okay.
I'm sure I do. For the record, Frederick Zelli, Bisogna, Leffler, and Zelli on behalf of the applicant.
Okay.
Happy New
Now,
Year,
I
everybody,
believe-
and thank you for hearing us tonight.
I appreciate you guys coming back and being so patient. Like I said, I think you got the record for most carries. That would be good in a football game, but not here.
Not so good in land use.
Yeah, right. I think we left off with your planner. I had finished the testimony. I just want to make sure. Did your planner finish, or did she have anything else?
I believe she has, but Beth, can you confirm that?
Yeah, my recollection is that I went through all the planning testimony, addressed all the variances, and the board wanted to carry the hearing and give folks a chance to ask questions at the next hearing tonight.
Yes, okay. I just wanted to make sure because I
Yep.
didn't want to go right into the questions without being absolutely certain that you guys were done. Okay.
Mr.
Now-
Chairman, what I'd like to do is go ahead and do that, but I just wanted to give the board a heads up. I'm also going to call Mr. Hollows after that, just for some very brief testimony to answer some questions that the board had raised at the last meeting.
That's fine. Now, before the board members ask question of their planner, does our planner have any questions of their planner? You're muted.
Okay, yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Hi, Beth, how are you doing?
Hi there. Hi there.
Okay, so I just wanted to go over a couple of things or ask you for some maybe additional testimony, because as you discussed last time, you need a D1 for not meeting 3, we'll call them conditions, even though it's conditional use,
Yes.
124.1. And 2 of them are units on the ground floor and units in excess of 1,000 square feet. And both of those are the affordable units. And I guess what I would like to know, there's no requirement to provide affordable, but you're not required to, there's no inclusionary or set aside ordinance in Long Hill. But I guess what I'd like to know is perhaps, and this may actually go towards your Medici argument, which is, can you provide some testimony as to why you don't have a fully non-residential ground floor?
Sure. I think that the project that we've proposed, which includes a mix of uses in the building, but specifically for this question on the ground floor, and just for everybody's recollection, we have an office space or commercial space fronting along Main Avenue, and then those 2 affordable units are at the rear of the building. I think that configuring the building in this way actually creates for a better project, quite honestly. And I say that because, and I had talked about this a little bit at the last hearing, I say that because it allows for us to have a building footprint that is appropriately scaled for the size of the property, remembering that we have a site here that is about 5 times, a little bit more than 5 times the minimum lot size. So we can have a building footprint that's appropriately scaled for the lot, and to do so without having what would otherwise be a significantly larger commercial space. And while the benefit of that might seem a little counterintuitive, given the variances that we're requesting, I think it's actually a benefit to this corridor and promoting commercial uses along the first floor, along the corridor of Main Avenue. One of the things that downtowns, and actually not even just downtowns, but frankly shopping centers as well, but specific here, downtowns have suffered in the last several years, is the loss of commercial tenants. And that's happened because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic consequences. But quite frankly, it started long before COVID was even a whisper. And that is because our retail landscape has really changed. You know, we have very much changing economic trends with the need for bricks and mortar, the need for physical store locations going down, given all of the other opportunities, namely just online retail shopping. And so the benefit that this project creates here, in addition to getting that nicely scaled building, is that we're leaving, how do I say this? We're leaving some additional retail demand available for other uses along Main Avenue. And frankly, I think that's really good, because what do you want to create in this area? I think Long Hill should want to, and based on your master plan, wants to create excuse me, a thriving retail district. And so by having commercial space here that's around 2,600 square feet, rather than perhaps 4,600 square feet, if that were all commercial space, we're able to have the most important part of this building, the area that fronts along Main Street, be occupied by commercial use, and essentially, you know, give over the demand or the supply, I guess, for the additional floor area to other uses along Main Street, which will help contribute to a thriving little commercial corridor, because you have not just a couple of buildings that are fully occupied, but actually a corridor with multiple businesses, so that it creates more of an inviting, walkable district, in the sense that there's that maybe you go to this building for a service and there's another use down a couple buildings down, another use across the street, etc. And so I think by keeping our retail space or commercial space in this building small, and really critically keeping it to the place that matters most, the frontage, the face of the building, we're not hogging that retail demand, that limited retail demand that exists for Main Avenue.
Okay, so I mean, in other words, would you say there has been changed circumstances, let's say, since perhaps the zoning or the master plan was last re-examined, which would influence your client's decision as to limiting the amount of non-residential space? I mean, sorry,
Yeah.
Limiting them. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so while I didn't use the term change circumstances, I think that's exactly what I've described. We've got the obvious change circumstance that we're literally dealing with right now as we do this over Zoom, which is the pandemic, but it's also the broader change circumstances to the retail economy, which is the expansion, the explosion of online shopping, and therefore the reduced demand for physical storefronts as compared to prior.
Okay, and just one final question is, and perhaps, I don't, this may be actually more appropriate for the applicant, but you have shown on the site plans office. Is that the intention? It would be some sort of office use? And is there any clarification or further elaboration that you could do? Is it intended to be like real estate offices or a doctor's office? And is it the intention of the applicant to not have a retail use or a restaurant use?
Right now, we've discussed office, but I think for any more detail, I am going to have to defer to my client on that. And I'm going to misspeak.
Okay. All right. Those are my only questions right now, Mr. Chairman.
All right, now I'm going to ask Rich, do you have any questions that you feel might be appropriate for the planner in your field?
I have no questions for the planner.
Okay.
Thank you.
All righty. Now, before we continue, I think the attorney has a question for Jerry for qualification. As far as his looking at and becoming familiar with this application.
Certainly. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yeah, Board Member Aronio, am I correct that you can certify under oath this evening that you listened to and or read the transcript and or watched the video of the hearing held on December 21, 2021, and therefore you are qualified to deliberate and vote this evening when I think it's safe to assume we will complete the application this evening?
Correct. And I also participated in another hearing prior to that.
Right. Hence you've participated or heard all of them, and so you're qualified, correct?
Correct.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Jay.
Chairman.
Don't forget to sign the document and get it back to Deborah,
Yes.
okay? Thank you for taking care of that point of clarification. All right, Does any of the board members have questions for Beth or our planner for that matter concerning this application?
And I have a question.
Go ahead, Joe.
So it was actually, I think in the November meeting, we were talking about building height and the variance that's required. So if I could just have clarification, my understanding, I think, is that it's being classified as a 3-story building. Is that right?
Yes, it is being classified as a 3-story building. We have 3 full stories visible from the rear but just 2.5 from the front along Main Avenue.
Okay. So on the 3rd floor, what activity is going to happen up there on the 3rd floor?
3rd floor is just simply residential use. We have 2
And how many
apartments there.
How many apartments are on the 3rd floor?
Just 2.
And there's 2 affordables, correct? 1 3-bedroom, 1 2-bedroom.
Yes.
Are any of those on the 3rd floor?
No,
No. Okay.
they're both on the 1st floor.
So is there on the 3rd floor? What are the number of bedrooms?
It's 2 bedrooms each, so there's 2 2-bedroom units.
Okay. What would the constraints be like? What would be different if you were to stick to our ordinance, 35 feet, 2.5 stories? Because it looks like 2.5. So just explain that to me. Like, why do we need 3? What's different about that half a story?
Well, so 2 things. So there's 2 components of the height, and I know this isn't quite on point, but I just want to reiterate this one point. The first component is just the number of feet, and the second one is the number of stories. I know your question is largely about the stories, but in terms of the feet, I just want to reiterate some testimony that was provided certainly by Mr. Campanella, and I may have referenced it as well. And that is that the project can be reduced in height down, it's just under a foot, down to 35 feet to a compliance building height in terms of feet. But we continue to request the variance because we think this actually adds to the, in a positive way, to the appearance of the building, makes the building look a little bit nicer. So, but so saying that, I recognize your question is about whether or not
Stories, not feet. So we
Yeah.
understand that it can be done. 35 feet can be done.
Yep.
So like you were accommodating there, what would it take to accommodate so you could actually accommodate yourself to our ordinance, to the existing
So,
ordinance, 2.5 stories?
In order to maintain compliance with the ordinance, which permits rather just 2 stories, that would mean that we would have to eliminate.
2.5.
Jerry, we're having trouble hearing you. You have to get closer to your phone.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what was that?
It's the ordinance is 2.5 stories is permitted, correct?
I'm not sure that's
I think
correct.
it's 2
I believe it's
stories.
2 stories in this zone.
Yeah, it's 2 stories. Yeah, so given the fact that
It is 2 stories.
Thank you. So given the 2 stories, it means that we would have to eliminate the top story or half story, depending on what direction of the building. And that would be an elimination of 2 units in the building.
Okay, so eliminate 2 units.
Yeah, I should specify that it would eliminate those two units. It might also necessitate changes in the building footprint to otherwise accommodate the 2 units. But given the building that we've proposed, that would be the result.
Okay. But you believe that the building could be redrawn on and change the footprint to have the same number of units and maintain our height ordinance in both feet and number of stories?
That might be a question better for the architect, honestly.
Okay, fair enough. I'll ask that question of the architect. Thank you. No more questions.
Any more questions of their planner? Yes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a couple. I know you testified this before, and I apologize. I just need a refresh here regarding the parking. I believe you said the design will comply with the township ordinance because of the reduction, but then you mentioned an RSIS requirement. Could you just speak to that one more time about what?
Yeah, so we are providing 23 parking spaces we would be required to provide 26 parking spaces if not for section 151A1, and that provides a 50% reduction of off-street parking requirements in the district. And so it's because of that provision, we are fully compliant with the township ordinance. That said, we also have in this state residential site improvement standards, and in those standards, which are applicable to residential developments in New Jersey, they include parking ratios. That said, municipalities do have the ability to issue waivers or reductions in this case to RSIS. But one of the topics that I had testified to was how does our proposal compare to RSIS, and can I justify some relief from those standards? And so what I had indicated was, again, we're providing 23 parking spaces. RSIS also requires 26 parking spaces. I had suggested that our proposed 23 spaces was adequate in this location because we're going to be able to, for two reasons, there's potential for reduced parking demand on the property because we have such wonderful proximity to the train station. It's about a 3-minute walk to the train station. And so I think it's reasonable to assume that folks will be less reliant on vehicles because they have access to the train station. I should say not only just the train station, but also some of the other shops and services that we see in this area of Long Hill. And so for those reasons, I think it's reasonable that we would have a reduced parking demand. But in addition, there's also a potential for shared parking as we have the residential uses as well as the office as well on the site.
Can I just add one quick thing is, I actually think technically you don't need an RSIS exception because you are required, with RSIS, it requires 16 spaces. And the ordinance allows the 50% reduction of the 10 for the office. So that would be 5 plus 16, which is 21, and you're providing 23. So you meet RSIS.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, actually. Yeah, thank you. I guess I didn't review those numbers quite as well. Thank you, Liz.
Good. So,
So just to clarify, so we're compliant to RSIS and the township ordinance on the parking.
Yes.
It does. Mm-hmm.
All right, great, thank you. One other issue regarding the density. I think there was some testimony about something around like 12 or 13 units per acre, where 5 is permitted.
Yep.
Would you be able to, if those 2 units on the ground floor were not residential, but that was all commercial, would you be able to know what the density per unit would be on the site then?
Yes. Although I would need a minute. I'd have to,
Yeah,
just,
sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Chairman, while Ms. Manis is
Yes.
calculating, I did a disservice to Mr. Aronio, and I apologize. I forgot our architect is not with us this evening due to a scheduling conflict.
oh, okay.
Obviously, he concluded his testimony, but just to address the question quickly, what would have to be done? Either the footprint would have to be expanded rearward, which would go into the parking lot, and you'd have additional impervious
Reduce
coverage.
parking, right?
Yeah, but you'd also take over impervious coverage, which is now grass between the parking lot and the building. The only other way to do it would be to either use up some of the commercial space, which defeats the whole purpose of having commercial space in the front of the building, or make the apartments much smaller. And your ordinance already restricts them to a relatively small size. We've more or less maxed them out at just under 1,000 square feet. But in order to keep the same number of units, we'd have to go with much smaller apartments, which I don't think, and Ms. McManus can address this, whether that from a planning perspective would be a good idea. I know Mr. Campanella did testify that smaller apartments would not be as desirable and as functional as the size that's been proposed here. I apologize, Mr. Aronio. I completely forgot. Mr.
Okay, no
Campanella.
apology necessary. There's, thank you for squaring that away. One more thing on that. On the agenda for this evening, it shows the applicant proposes to merge the existing 2 lots and construct a 2-story residential apartment building. It doesn't say 3-story.
It's 3-story. It's supposed to say 3.
Where does it say that?
On
It
the
says
agenda,
3. You're looking at the wrong agenda. The new one says 3.
Oh, I don't have the new one, do I?
I don't know, Jerry, but the new one says 3.
If
I
it
just
says,
clicked
if it
on-
says 2 somewhere, it's a typographical error. It's definitely 3.
Okay,
It
I
does
clicked
say
on
2.
Board of
It does say,
Adjustment.
it says 2 lots to construct a 3-story mixed-use building.
Yeah,
Okay,
there was
so,
a
just for
revised
the
agenda
record,
that went
Ed,
out earlier.
Ed, excuse me,
Yeah.
Deborah. For the record, if you click on the town calendar under
Yeah.
tonight's meetings and drill
Oh.
into the zoning board agenda, that's where I got it from. So if it's the
Oh.
wrong one, it's the wrong one on the town calendar. So we should
Yeah.
It
change
hasn't
that.
been
because-
it hasn't been updated on the website.
Okay,
Okay.
so the chairman just said that I have the wrong one. So I have the one that's on the website.
Well,
Whether
you-
that's correct
The
or not,
wrong one is on the website.
Okay.
unfortunately.
fair enough. Okay, so let's call that what it is. We should correct
Yeah.
that so that people that have interest in
Yeah.
the number
Well,
of
thank
stories.
you.
being built
I
in the
didn't
town-
realize that the wrong one was there.
Right, that's significant.
Yeah.
People, the 3-story thing is an issue in the town, and people should know that. All right, that's a different thing.
All right,
Um,
Ms. McManus, could you just finish?
Yeah.
I know you dropped off.
Let
There's
her
there.
finish,
parking. We were talking about parking, and when he's done, I want to
Well,
talk
wait
about
a
that.
minute,
too.
Jerry, hold on. She's gonna let her finish answering Brian's question, then you can continue, okay?
Right.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the question was, what would the density be if we had a loss of 2 units? So instead of 8 units down to 6 units, the density would be a change from 13 units an acre to approximately 9.8 units an acre.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now, Jerry, you have another question?
Yeah, it was about the parking, and I'm sorry if I'm not that technical with the RSIS requirements and everything else, but some numbers were being thrown around. And again, at the document that I'm reading, it says RSIS requires 26, 23 proposed. Our planner threw out some numbers. Can someone just tell me what's required by our ordinance, what's required by RSIS, which one they need to comply with, and what's proposed? I'm sorry for that, but I missed kind of that when it was going back.
Okay, allow me to just go through it really quickly. RSIS requires 16 units of parking, right? And the ordinance typically for this type of office space would require 10. So it's 10 plus 16 is 26. The ordinance has a provision, though, that in the B15, which this zone is, if it's on Main Ave, which this is, you can reduce the parking demand by 50%. And so initially what the applicant was saying is 50%, so that the 26 required is actually now 13 required, but they are providing 23. So if I haven't lost you yet, so.
I got it now. Thank you
Okay,
for
so
clarifying.
our-
that. Now I understand.
Okay,
Thank you.
All right.
That's not changing. The 23 is still the same number.
exactly,
All right, good.
exactly.
Any other questions of their planner? Jonathan? Go ahead.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is just, and I should probably know for my own, I should probably know myself, but it's probably something that Ms. McManus, you've looked at least. In terms of the presence on the street this building will have in term, I guess, from frontage, I guess, the building's frontage, how does it compare to other buildings and houses in the area in terms of, like, is it similar size? Is it smaller, bigger? I think it's bigger, but I'm just asking. Is it much bigger? What's the, how does it compare to other things in that area?
So I can't give you a breakdown of exactly how we compare, but I can tell you that our building is a little under 88 feet wide along Main Avenue. And as I look at the aerial photograph, and I recall from my site visits to the property, I do think it's fair to say that this building is going to have a little bit larger of a presence or a frontage that you see along parts of Main Avenue, but I don't think it's going to be so outsized that it's going to dwarf what you see elsewhere. So, for example, if I take a look at our at our block here along Main Avenue between Railroad and Somerset Street, what I see are a variety of sized buildings. And the building located to the south at Main and Somerset, a neighboring property, that's one of the larger buildings in this block. And it looks like that building has a width of a little more than 60 feet. And so we're certainly a bit larger than that, but only 25, 30 feet. So it doesn't strike me as a building that's going to be so outsized or so much larger than some of these surrounding buildings that the building is going to appear out of scale or like it's going to have too much building mass. And some of the other things that other factors, I should say, that contribute toward my thinking on this is particularly as we look across Main Avenue from the site, we do see a number of smaller buildings, but they're quite close together. And so what that creates is a more, something close to a continuous building wall, as opposed to a variety of individually placed and particularly spaced buildings that this will contradict. The other thing that's important to recall about our building, and I'm sorry, I don't know what exhibit this was, but I'm looking at the building facade rendering. And so our building facade our architect has taken great care to try to break up the building facade so the building doesn't look particularly large, so that it doesn't look like a monolith. And instead, we've got a number of building modules across the front. I would say about 3 building modules to help sort of break up the building mass and sort of bring it down in scale to be consistent with what we see elsewhere along Main.
And a follow-up question on parking. So I think I understand after Liz explained. So it sounds, if I'm interpreting this right, it sounds as if you now, because of the location on Main Street and because of on-street parking availability, that you have more than enough parking necessary.
Yeah, that's correct. We, based on the municipal ordinance and taking into account that permitted reduction because of our location, I think we're have an excess of 3 parking spaces.
Would it, again, just throwing this out there, would it make sense then to, because I know there was some concern about drainage, et cetera, and maybe that's not for you, it's not really for you necessarily, but in terms of a planning perspective, would it make sense to have 3 less spots? Or would that not be viable for this site?
To some extent, there's always a benefit to eliminating impervious cover where possible. But that said, I'm also a little wary of under parking this site. If I didn't know that there are times of particular parking demand along this area of Main Avenue, I might be more comfortable with it. But knowing what I do about Sterling and some of the concerns or the questions and the conversation that happened during the earlier hearings, it strikes me that it may be a good idea for us to be able to maintain those 26 parking spaces on the site so that we're not creating a burden in the event of different parking demand than what's expected in the future. I wouldn't want to see that happen.
Excuse me, you said maintain 26 spaces, Beth. I think you meant maintain 23.
23.
Yeah, thank you.
26 was the original, what we thought was the original requirement.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions of their planner?
This is
Yes.
Gary Knackus. I have a question for Ms. McManus. Would you classify this as the largest building on Main Avenue?
I don't have an analysis to say specifically yes or no. I can't verify that that there's no building that's larger. I can certainly say that I think it's one of the larger buildings along Main Avenue, but I can't tell you specifically the sizes of the other buildings.
Visited the area, so you're familiar with the other buildings.
I'm sorry?
you did visit the area and
Yes, I did visit the area, but for example, I haven't looked at their building. I haven't evaluated their building footprints.
Okay,
You can't tell how far back a building goes from a site visit if you're, inspecting buildings from along the street.
okay, so we're looking at an application for one of the largest buildings on Main Avenue. Is that fair enough to say?
Yeah, it is going to be one of the larger buildings along Main Avenue. I do need to say that, but I also just want to reiterate once again that we're less than 1 foot over the number of feet permitted in the district, and we're not seeking relief from other aspects that would control the building size, such as the side yard setback or the rear yard setback.
Okay, thank you. And my other question would be for our planner, who asked you a question, and I wasn't sure if her answer was fulfilled to her satisfaction with regards to the use on the first floor.
Well, I think that the question I had was, you could eliminate 2 aspects of your variance and actually diminish third aspect of your variance, because if you got rid of those ground floor apartments, because you would eliminate the units in excess of 1,000 square feet, and you would eliminate ground floor living, and then the density would come down. It wouldn't be compliant, but it would come down. And I think what Ms. McManus's testimony was that, those conditions, I put conditions in quotes, that are in the ordinance may have made sense in a different market condition when the ordinance was written. And so I think her testimony, if I'm characterizing it correctly, is that times have changed, and there may no longer be, it may no longer be viable to have a footprint of 4,600 square foot or whatever that is, square foot footprint of non-residential use on the ground floor.
Okay, right. There was also that component of the part that will be commercial use, and whether that was just limited to, office use.
Oh, yeah, no, that question has not been answered. I would like to get an understanding of that question, or an answer to that question.
I believe that was answered, Mr. Clintock's testimony, but I have no objection to recalling him for limited testimony in that answer after Mr. Hollows.
Any other questions?
I'd like to, just in response to that last question from Mr. Giannakis, one other thing to take into account with regard to the rear first floor apartments is what's behind us, which is an entire garden apartment complex, all of which are on the first, not all of the apartments are on the first floor, but the first floors of all of those buildings are residential. So the rear of our building is adjacent to that exact use, albeit in a different zone. So what we've accomplished is to comply with what the ordinance is looking for and having the commercial use on the front, and at the same time having something entirely consistent in the back when you compare to what's behind us.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
may I ask a question of the applicant
Sure.
specifically for a stipulation in the event there is an approval, and that is that based upon the logic and professional planning testimony of Ms. McManus as to sort of an addition by a subtraction, having a commercial but not quite 4,600 square feet of commercial on the first floor, given the changed circumstances in retail, brick and mortar no longer being viable, notwithstanding in the pandemic. Is the applicant willing to stipulate to the magnitude of the square footage of non-residential being on the first floor and being on the first floor frontage as opposed to the rear? Because this is a variance relief. If it's granted, arguably they could put the commercial in the back and the residential in the front one day.
Yes, we would absolutely stipulate to that.
Okay, I hope the
Mr.
board
Clintock is
members-
shaking his head, but I realize he means he agrees with you.
Yeah,
Correct,
he's
don't you?
shooting in the affirmative.
I was-
right? Yeah.
Yeah, we would
the,
not not put it in the back. Correct.
Right, and you would maintain at least that magnitude of square footage of commercial and in the front, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
hopefully the board understands that and appreciates that in the event there is an approval. I don't know how our board planner feels.
Well, just one question I had while Mr. Clintock is available, which is restaurant is a permitted use, and I can't recall your testimony whether you indicated any desire, but given its proximity to residences, I think I would advise the board to perhaps limit it, any potential for restaurant use that has potential for fire, et cetera, so close to residences.
I have no, as I testified at the first hearing, I have no desire to put a restaurant or doctor's office. I think those
And
are the two
you would
that
stipulate to those exceptions if the board so desired, and as a condition of approval, if there is a condition?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So if they get sick or hungry, they have to go somewhere else.
Liz, just a follow-up question on that.
It's a great
If that's
restaurant across the street.
Just a follow-up question on that. If that's you're saying that a restaurant is a permitted use in the zone?
I believe so. I'll double check.
right,
I'll
well-
double check.
Well, just, I guess my question to the attorney then, are we even allowed to stipulate that you can't put a use in the zone that's permitted by ordinance?
Yes. I'm sorry, if you meant me.
Yes.
With the
Go
chair's permission as opposed to applicant's
No,
counsel.
go ahead.
Yes, you are. As a condition of approval, it would have a nexus, reasonable relation to the detriments associated with the application for variance relief, which is an exception in and of itself. And therefore, we have that authority. If they were not seeking any relief, of course, then they would have an as of right entitlement to any use that is permitted by the zone. But once you seek relief, if there is a detriment to that relief, by definition, all variances are exceptions. They have detriments associated with them that can be mitigated by a limitation in the use, even if it were otherwise permitted, then you have the right to impose such a condition, and that nexus would save you on an appeal. But it's even better when it's stipulated to, because then it's without question, the applicant is agreeing with it and agreeing that there's a reasonable relationship.
Thank you.
And since a variance is forever, that's why it's important to get those stipulated two conditions.
Thank you. Any other questions of the planner? Yes, Tom.
I believe we touched on it in the first meeting, but you have two apartments in the back, 1,000 square feet. We know all about that. But the only egress is out the back. Can we stipulate that there needs to be two egresses so that all the people from the apartment buildings can come down and either go out the front or the back? I know that the site plan doesn't show, it just shows the front of the building being a contiguous office space. But if you're going to, I don't know if you can bifurcate it and have a hallway down the middle, so that if, God forbid, there's a fire and the back door is encumbered, there needs to be another way out.
Mr. Clintock, let me ask you a question on that since Mr. Campanella is not here. Am I not correct? Is there not a door from that hallway to the office space that could be used in an emergency situation?
There is, yes.
Well, I guess my concern would be that there's a door there, but a lot of offices will lock that front door, and if it's not accessible to be pushed open from the inside, and also anybody who lives in that apartment area of the building, I'm just trying to protect the office owner here, or the renter, could come down and just walk around the office. You don't want to have that happen. So
we could, Mr. Clintock, you can correct me if you disagree with anything I say on this, but it seems to me we could have, an emergency exit type of door only. I don't know exactly how that would work, but there's got to be some way it could be set up, and the tenants would certainly know not to enter that space. There's got to be some way that could be
like an alarm door. If you push it, the alarm goes off.
Mm-hmm.
For starters, sure.
And you might want to put one at the end of the hallway between the two downstairs apartments, so that people can't go through there into the office, and then once they do, they need to get out.
That's what he's talking about.
No, I'm talking about, but you need both doors to open.
But respectfully, without the architect here, I think we're sort of stipulating, because there are building code requirements for exiting through additional, adjacent spaces. Like you're opening up a different can of things that another professional needs to evaluate. So maybe I'm not sure that we should stipulate to this time.
No, I think that whatever they need to do under the fire code, they need to do. So that's not something we have to worry about.
Right.
Because Tom, as you said, if the egress and ingress has to be there, they have to do it.
But Mr. Chairman, I think there's a nuance that's being asked here. I think the testimony up to this point was that a single exit is code compliant as of right.
That's correct. That is correct.
What is being suggested here is that as a condition of approval, maybe 2 exits should be provided. What I'm saying, if that's going to be one of our conditions, an architect should be looking at this, because it could be creating code issues, exiting through a commercial space for residential.
Right,
Someone else needs to look at other than us.
Yeah.
I'm
As
not-
long as they're
I'm not
compliant
suggesting
with
that
the fire code, I would leave it the way it is, only because it is compliant. And there is a door for the to get into the office. So I don't know whether that, we'd have to leave that up to the professionals if that could be made a fire door. But I wouldn't make that a condition.
Right. I'm not suggesting making it a condition. I just want to understand that we're certainly willing to discuss with the fire official if that's an issue or a concern. We're certainly willing to be cooperative. We certainly want our tenants to be safe as well. So.
Sounds good. Okay.
But if I may, there might be a compromise position that the board may wish to consider if the applicant stipulated to it, and that is that a second egress door, if it can be done in a code compliant way, pursuant to the appropriate representatives, fire official, building code, etc. If the applicant's willing to stipulate to that, the board might want to take the applicant up on that stipulation, but I just throw it out there as an alternative.
Okay. Well, that's basically what I was saying, that, if they can do it and it's code compliant and it's compliant with whatever other ordinances there are to get in, going through that commercial space or providing another access, fine, but I don't want to create a problem.
Mr. Clintock, are you comfortable with that kind of wording, or would you rather rely on not having stipulation, just the understanding we'll be as cooperative as we can?
Yeah, we would be as cooperative as we can with the fire officials and do what their recommendation is. I have no issue with that.
Okay.
So if it's a wired fire door into the space, we're totally fine with that.
Okay. So, well, Tom, I understand your concern, but we can't be mandating things that may not be compliant with fire codes, or maybe violate some other code that we're not familiar with. So let them leave that up to the fire official. I think that, if we need a door that is a fire door or some other way of getting it out, we'll leave that up to them.
Fair enough.
Questions of their planner? Any other questions of the planner? Tom, go ahead. I'm Jonathan, I'm sorry.
Sorry, following up from what you mentioned before, you were talking about comparative buildings. Did you mention you were speaking of the building or the home? I guess it's a building on the northwest corner of Maine and what was it, Somerset? Is that the one you were referring to?
Yeah, it was. I thought that building was to the south, but maybe my orientation was a bit off.
I believe it's to the south.
It is south. Yeah.
Yeah, to the south along Main Avenue. I'd say
I'm saying on the
that building on that.
Northwest corner.
But it's on the northwest corner of, are you talking about the building?
Yes, yeah, I'm sorry. It's at the northwest quadrant of that intersection, but south of the site.
In comparison to that building, and I don't remember, I'm sorry, I don't have the drawings in front of me.
Mhm.
How close is this proposed building to the sidewalk? Is it right on top of the sidewalk, similar to that building? Or is it?
How close is our proposed building is your
Yes.
question? Yeah, we have a front yard setback of 11 feet from Main Avenue. If you take a look at our site plan, you can see that we've got obviously the concrete sidewalk along the street, but then also a pathway leading to the steps and the porch up to the building, such that we've got the front yard setback of 11 feet, which I do think is larger than what we see for that building that you'd referenced, that I'd given a comparison for.
But the 11 feet includes the sidewalk then? Or?
I'm sorry,
width
say
of the
that.
sidewalk? Does the 11 feet you're referencing include the width of the sidewalk? Or are you
No,
saying
the
11
way
feet
that
from the sidewalk?
from the sidewalk, the way that your right of way, the way that the lot is oriented, the setback is, and let me give a little bit more nuance to this. So not only are we not including the sidewalk just by virtue of where the lot line is, so the sidewalk to the street is another at least 11 feet. But the 11 feet is actually measured to not the main facade, but just the steps that come down from the front of the building. And so the appearance of the front yard setback will exceed the 11 feet that it is based on the township zoning ordinance and our particular plans.
Would you say then, in your expert opinion, that the setback of that building, of your building, in comparison to the building on the northwest corner of Main and Somerset, which is pretty much, I think it's right on the sidewalk, as far as I remember. Some parts are right on the sidewalk, some parts are not. That would have the feeling of less size then?
Well, yeah, I mean, by virtue of having a larger setback, it most certainly reduces the perception of the building mass and the scale of the building. Just by setting it back, it you know, the natural nature of that will do that, as the building is not quite as in your face if you're on a sidewalk or close to the street. So that will certainly have the result of reducing the appearance of building mass.
And I know that building, there are some small street trees that kind of, you know, from at least the street, not from the sidewalk, block the building facade a little bit. Is there any plantings that are planned for that front yard setback that might also create this kind of feeling that it's not as large, you know, to kind of shield the view of something that's this large? Or was that not really, in your expert opinion, would that not necessarily have any effect on the appearance of the building if there were some sort of?
I can't tell you that we're proposing plants enough that it would provide a screen of the building, you know, such that you wouldn't experience the building mass or the building height. But we have edge plantings along the frontage of the building, as well as a couple of trees. And so what that's going to do is it's going to soften the appearance of the building and also give the eye something else to focus on as you're walking or driving along the street, with that something else, of course, being the plantings rather than only the building.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions by board members? Yes, Rich.
Yeah. I'd just like to, it's something I brought up last time, and it's really nothing pertaining to Ms. McManus's testimony, but the architecture plans that I have do not show that 5-foot bump out on the front porch. So what I'd like to confirm is that scale is 5 feet. So I'd like to just confirm that in any discussions or any approval that the board might offer, that dimension, which appears to be 16 feet from the right of way to the principal part of the building, would be what the applicant is seeking. So it would actually be 16 feet to the front setback, not to the main building, not 11 feet to the porch, because it's not consistent with the architecture plans.
Fred, you want to address that?
I believe Mr. Campanella did address that, but that is certainly accurate, and we can agree to revise the plans to the extent they need to be revised.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if there's nothing else, I did have one quick question before the public.
Sure.
Based on some colloquy that just took place. Ms. McManus, if the board were to grant the approval but impose a condition of approval that for safety purposes there be a second emergency egress exit from the first floor of the building, as opposed to simply say that whatever is sufficiently compliant vis-a-vis the code, which might be only one egress, nevertheless, would such a condition, in your opinion, imposed by the board, have a sufficient nexus from safety and other perspectives for mitigation, a sufficient nexus to mitigate the detriments associated with the relief sought in this application? Or is it your testimony that from a professional planning perspective, the imposition of such a condition would be arbitrary, capricious, or unreasonable? You're not saying that, are you?
I would never say that about a board I'm testifying to.
Mhm.
I think it's without question that a condition like that addresses the safety of the building. We're certainly comfortable that following the building code is adequate, but if such a condition makes the board comfortable with various aspects of the building, such as the increased building height, such as the residential units on the first floor, I can see that connection being appropriate, that nexus being appropriate.
Thank you. Nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. All right. No more questions from the board, I assume. Are there any members of the public, Deborah?
Yes, Mr. Arentowitz.
Go ahead, Charles.
Yes, I believe the planner testified that the current application would be a density of 13 units per acre. Based on your tour of the town.
Mr. Chairman, before the member speaks, I know the board is familiar with the member, but I would like his name and address for the record.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Please state your name and address for the
Charles Arentowitz, Arentowicz, Millington, New Jersey, a resident of the town of merely 40 years.
Thank you.
What is your address, sir?
Yeah, the street address.
Millington, New Jersey.
What's the street address, Charles?
605 Heritage Road.
Thank you.
40 years, as I said.
Thank you.
I believe the planner testified that their current application would be 13 units per acre as a density. Based on their tour of the town in Main Avenue, how many other places in town are 13 units or higher?
Well, I know that the township doesn't have a substantial amount of multifamily housing, but as I take a look at this area of the municipality, what I notice is that we are directly adjacent to a site with very similar density, and that is the apartment complex to the rear, which I believe is called Sterling Manor. That is in a zone that permits a density of 12 units an acre. And so that's just 1 unit per acre below that which we are proposing. Elsewhere along Main Avenue, there are a variety of smaller multifamily properties, but they're substantial, they're sort of consistent with the testimony provided. They're in smaller buildings. I haven't run the density calculations for what some of those smaller buildings may be. But I do also want to note that through its affordable housing process, the municipality committed to provide zoning for a handful of sites throughout the municipality at a densities that I believe are at 12 units an acre and also 14.5 units an acre, with that highest density of 14.5 units an acre being located to the southeast along or proximate to Valley Road.
Where is that 14.5 acres?
I don't have the block and lot. I know that it's located to the southeast along Valley Road. I want to say it's in proximity to Plainfield, east of Plainfield Road, but I don't have the block and lot or the address. It's the Elite Properties site is the name of the property that I'm familiar with.
It's my understanding that with the affordable housing, the Township Committee and the Planning Board permitted 12 units per acre, and I don't believe any of the current applications in those areas are above 12 units an acre.
That project may not have made an application
Bear
yet.
with
I
me,
don't know.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I believe Mr. Aronowitz intended to conclude that statement with the question, isn't that correct, Ms. McManus?
There
Right.
you go. Thank you.
I don't know. It's possible that this other property of reference has not made an application yet. And so that may be the distinction, but it's my understanding the zoning for that site is at 14.5 units an acre.
Is that what you're testifying to? That it's 14.5 units an acre?
Well, our project is not at.
No,
14,
what
yeah.
you're testifying is, it's your understanding that the town has on record that they're permitted 14.5 units an acre on Valley Road?
That is my understanding, that there's an inclusionary housing site that has a density of that is that high.
You didn't answer the question. Are you certifying on the record that the town has
I'm gonna
approved
object to
on
that
Valley
question.
Wait a
Road
minute.
14?
You're asking her to certify about something that she's not.
Hold on. She's just testifying as to her, what she thinks is her knowledge of the area. Whether she's right or
Things
wrong.
are knowledge.
she
I want to
just-
certify her testimony
She
tonight.
can't do that because she didn't research that. And that's something that she's looking
Well,
up.
she testified that she toured the town.
All right. Well, hold on. Ms. McManus, how are you getting this knowledge as to 14? Where are you getting that?
That is based on research I had done for this application and a prior application I've done here in Long Hill Township that involves inclusionary housing and looking into the municipality's affordable housing settlement with Fair Share Housing Center.
So you got this from the Fair Share Housing settlement information?
Yes, through your affordable housing documents, including but not limited to the settlement agreement the township executed with Fair Share Housing Center.
Okay.
I attended the hearing on December 15, 2017, before Judge.
I'm going to object because this does not sound like the
There was
question.
nothing on record that
Charles,
said that
hold
it
on.
was 12 units an acre.
Charles, she testified to where she got the information. If you disagree
I'm
with
telling
it,
you, I
fine.
attended the meeting and read the court testimony.
I'm going to object to this. It's testimony.
Okay. Charles, we have to take her testimony from what she said. She got it from a document. If you disagree with it, fine. That's fine. But we're not going to have a disagreement here on the record.
Right. I want to go on the record that I attended.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Aronowitz, you're entitled to go on the record and make that counter statement. Absolutely, you have that constitutional right, but only if we can swear you in before you do it.
Yeah,
Swear me in.
You're asking questions now. So
Swear
wait
me
till
in.
the end and then you can say what you want, okay?
Swear
Now
me
it's
in.
just questions. You have any more questions for the planner?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Go ahead.
I printed out the agenda at 6:30 p.m. tonight off the website. And it says the applicant proposed to merge the existing two lots and construct a two-story residential apartment building.
That was the wrong one, Charles. The right one hadn't been posted yet.
Well, I want to go on record as a taxpayer of Long Hill Township that what I read and printed out at 6:30 p.m. this evening said a height of 2 stories.
Okay. Well, I apologize for that, but somehow
I don't want to apologize. I just want to be on record that
Okay.
that's what was available to the public.
Yes, we determined that already. Mr. Aronio brought that to our attention already.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, because that constrains me to defend the board in the process, may I speak?
Sure.
Thank you. Nevertheless, that testimony, which was just not provided, not under oath, I also have to point out that the notice, MLUL notice provided by the applicant, as well as other Open Public Meeting Open Public Meeting Act notices by the board, all not only indicated that it was a 3-story building, but also indicated in the variance relief sought that one of the variances sought was for 3 stories as opposed to 2 stories. So that information was readily available pursuant to the MLUL notices that were served and pursuant to the Open Public Meeting Act notices that were provided by this board. And therefore, it's my legal opinion that the board continues to have jurisdiction to hear the application and that the Open Public Meeting Act and the MLUL requirements were sufficiently satisfied. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman.
Thank you.
My last question is, I'd like to ask the planner to provide to the board where this 14 units per acre.
Charles,
information
we're
is.
not going into that now. That is not relevant.
I want to
I'm
put
going
on
to
the
stop
record.
you now. Stop. Time out. It's not relevant. It really isn't relevant. It's another area of town. If it's not on Main Street, I don't want to hear it.
Well, here's the problem, Mr. Chairman. We're talking about 12, 13, or 14 units an acre. And I think it's critical to this board to make a decision on what the units are in this town.
Again, Mr. Aronowitz can
I'll
speak at
testify.
length when it comes time for testimony. This is not time for testimony.
I will
Time
testify.
out. I'll let you testify later when you have a summary. But right now we have to ask questions. You've already asked that question. It's been answered. She told you where you got the information, where you got it. So
No, what I asked for was the documentation to support that testimony.
well, she couldn't give you that. She can only tell you where she read it. Okay. So obviously that wasn't something that we anticipated worrying about at this time. What's the
certainly
density
worry
of this
about it.
property? Ms. McManus, what's the density of this property?
This property, we're proposing a density of 13 units an acre.
Okay. And you need a variance for that. So it's you get a variance, you don't get a variance. There's really no difference whether it's 12 or 14 or whatever in another area. Is there any more questions?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public members want to ask questions?
Yes, we have Pam Ogens.
Yes, Pam.
Hello, can you hear
Yes.
me? Hi,
Yes.
my name is Pamela Ogens. I live on the Crescent in Millington. I did serve 3 years on the Master Plan Committee, and I know that this has already been discussed, so I won't belabor the point, but as a committee member, I did become very familiar with dwelling units per acre, and currently we do not in Long Hill Township.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, due process
All right,
procedurally.
do you have a question?
We have to swear
Do you
in
have a
if she's going
question?
to testify, if it's a question, which
Okay.
the question is of Ms. McManus.
Okay, my question is there any thought that has been given to making the facade of the building which is being proposed in sync with the building that will be, I think its side is 15 feet away next door? If working with the current owner of that building, which will remain, to perhaps make the buildings look a little more in sync with each other.
Ms. Ogens, can I just ask for a clarification, please? You say the building next door, on which side?
Okay, it would be heading, it's the building the apartment building that is on the corner of Somerset and Main. It's right next door. It's a big white building. I believe I know it's apartment building. It's actually very interesting inside. I've been to apartment in that building, but when you look at it from the street, because the setback with it looks like there's an addition of an enclosed entryway is very close to the street and looks, it's not especially attractive.
So are you asking if we've considered bringing our building closer to the street in order to be consistent with that building? Did I understand your question correctly?
No, just the facade of your building. It looks, from what I haven't seen photos, just from the drawings, it looks like you may have taken into account the building across the street, the Sterling Hotel, with their quasi front porch. And it's aesthetically, it looks quite pleasing. If you would consider working with the owner of the building, which now will just be 15 feet away, to assist that owner or do whatever you can to make the buildings look more in sync with each other on Main Avenue, since I think it's gonna look really unusual to have this lovely new building next to basically a white square.
I'm sure our architect would be happy to work with the neighboring property owner if they wanted to make some improvements to their building, but we had not contemplated working with neighboring property owners to, if I understand your question, to improve their buildings.
Ms. Ogden, the building you're talking about, that's a white square, is the one that's getting knocked down.
No, it's not.
No.
I beg to differ, sir. You need to look again.
Which building are you talking about? To the right of this building or to the left?
As you face the building to the left, at the one at the corner of Somerset and Main.
Oh, to the left. Okay.
Well, I said the corner of Somerset and Main.
Right. Well, that's kind of farther away, but that's fine.
No, it's 15 feet next to the property line.
Okay.
As I read the application, sir. So it's
Okay,
not
that's
really
fine.
far away at all.
That's to the property line, but to the building, it's more than 15 feet.
Yeah, as you will face them, they're gonna look pretty close together. Not gonna look.
Why
that
would you
far
want
apart.
it to look like that building?
Mr. Chairman, I think
I'm
we're getting
not-
testimony again.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, did we want to
That's
have
fine.
questions? And
Do you have an actual question for the planner?
Well, I think you misstated me, so let me just say, the building that is being proposed aesthetically looks very pleasing. And
Okay.
I asked if there was going to be perhaps some consideration with the building next door to bring them more into sync.
Well, that's not within our jurisdiction because the building next door is not before us. And unless it does come before us, we can make them look nicer, but we can't at this point.
Well, we certainly are trying to beautify downtown Sterling now, aren't we? So maybe it's something we should think about with the current owner of that building.
I
In any
understand that,
case,
but for
I
this
understand that's
application,
beyond your purview.
maybe if you
appreciate
could
that.
persuade this person to buy that building, maybe it will happen.
Well,
Other
there
than
you
that-
go. There you go. I leave that to you.
But
Not
yeah,
a
but
bad
that's
idea at all.
really, Ms. Ogden, I really don't see any more questions that you might have for the planner because that was an architect question. That
Well,
wasn't a planner question.
Yeah,
You have
well, I
you
do
a
have
question for
another
the architect- for the
question.
planner.
I understand that, and I just, because this is appropriate time, I know it's not for the planner, but because I did read the agenda and I did read 2 stories as well, I would like to make an appeal that the chairman or their designee read what is posted for the public immediately prior to going live with such meeting, so we can start these meetings with corrections rather than relying on someone to notice the error or the inconsistency. That's all I'm asking. You or a
Okay.
designee, make sure that everything is right before the citizens of the town spend their time reading information that's incorrect. And I
Well, that was the
appreciate
only, that in defense of the board, that was the only spot that was incorrect. Everything else was correct. That was a typographical error that was not corrected because of the situation where the township building is closed down. We're not as able to do these things as we normally would be if people are in town hall. We're
Well,
doing
sir,
everything
excuses
remotely,
are
so
not
things
needed. I'm
quite as-
simply making a plea. Excuses are not needed. I'm just making a suggestion and a plea, sir. Let's leave it at that.
All right, well, if you have no more questions, I'm gonna move on.
I do
Any
not,
other
and I
members
thank
of the
you for
public
your
have
time and
questions?
your
Thank you.
attention.
Thank you. Any other members of the public have questions?
Yes, Mr. Rentowitz.
Yes, go ahead, Charles.
A procedural question, because I just did research on the properties at Valley Road on what the density was. So how do I bring that before this board?
Unless it has a
Steve,
question
that
about
would be
this
testimony. That would be testimony.
When can I
at the end.
testify?
When we're done with all the questions and we're done with the testimony.
Okay,
All right,
great.
you will have your chance. Any other questions of the board for their planner?
Members of the public? Any other members? Going
Okay,
once?
hearing none, done. All right, you have any, you said you wanted Mr. Hollows to testify.
Yes, I just want to recall Mr. Hollows briefly to address a couple issues that came up at the last meeting.
Okay. Go ahead, Bill.
Mr. Hollows, you
What came
understand
up
that you're
at-
still under oath?
You're still under oath
I understand.
and you're still licensed.
Yes, in good
Okay,
standing
good.
since a month ago or 2 weeks ago.
Good.
Mr. Hollows,
We
if
had-
you please just identify the two issues and give your explanation, please.
The two issues had to do with the critical area calculations. I had done those really kind of quick with a scale. And since then, we've done them now with AutoCAD. And I've had a discussion with Mr. Keller, and we're using the DEP's 100-year elevation of 214.5 rather than the FEMA of 214.0. And just to give you these numbers, the lot area is 26,880 square feet. The total critical area of that property is 15,570 square feet. The total non-critical area is 11,310 square feet. And the impervious area non-critical is 7271. The percentage of non-critical area is 64.3, where 70% is allowed. I think those were really the numbers that I think Mr. Thornton had brought that up. It was checklist item number 30. And I think that this now covers that checklist item number 30 that that he had brought up at the previous meeting in the critical areas. And I, since the last meeting, I had a chance to do it really with AutoCAD and came up with actual numbers of 64.3, which is under the 70% allowable.
Mr. Chairman, can we get confirmation then that the applicant's not seeking that variance relief and confirmation from our engineer that it's not required?
Yeah, Rich, do you concur?
Yeah, Bill did send me the drawing. It was kind of, I think as I mentioned last time, while the meeting was going on, I was sketching out some coverage numbers in AutoCAD, and I thought the percentage was about 65%, which was pretty good. And Bill confirmed that. So I think that variance relief will not be required from that section of the ordinance.
Just to state for the record, what exactly is the section of the ordinance that they do not need a variance for?
Have that in front of me.
It's 143, hold on.
142.1. Item C, 142.1C.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
all right.
Yep.
All right, that's good. That clarifies that. Any other testimony, Mr. Zeller?
Mr. Hollows, there was the second issue. I'm sorry, you did raise both of them. No, I have nothing further from Mr. Hollows.
Any questions of Mr. Hollows that hasn't already been answered concerning his recent testimony now? Okay. Any members of the public want to ask Mr. Hollows questions about what he just said and what he just clarified about the lack of need for that variance?
Mr. Thornton?
Yes.
Oh, wait, hold on a minute. No,
No?
hold on a minute. Okay, Mr. Thornton raised his hand, okay.
Yes,
Mr. Thornton?
Mr. Thornton. Would you please give us your name, address, and your question?
Yes, my name is Patrick Thornton. I am the owner of 220 Main, but my residence is 50 Camptown Drive in Berkeley Heights, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Okay, first I want to thank Mr. Hollows and Mr. Keller for collaborating on this. You may recall that, I'll get to my question. I have a question.
Okay.
But it was around 40% at the last meeting, and we were pretty satisfied that we weren't there. And I appreciate Mr. Hollows and Mr. Keller revisiting the numerator and denominator and coming up with what seems to be a good result. My only question is that should, just for the record, these calculations be documented in a checklist compliance so that the evidentiary basis for concluding it did not apply is in the record and clear for all to see.
The plan sets will be revised accordingly, so that'll take care of that.
Okay. And again, I guess I want to ask, is this a standard denominator calculation, the FEMA one? Did I understand that, Bill? I mean, if it wasn't you, it was somebody else, would you use the same denominator to arrive at this calculation?
Yeah, it's actually the number we're going on is the flood elevation.
Right.
Using a DEP. And I had done both of them. Actually, I did the 214 and I did the 214.5, and both of them are below the 70%.
Right. Okay. And so that would be a standard for anybody in your position to use. It's not just you can pick and choose how you calculate the denominator. This is really any bona fide engineer would come up with the same calculation you did.
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. All right. That's good enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thornton.
Yeah, I would second that as well. The DEP clearly define, our ordinance is somewhat silent, but the DEP clearly requires that you use the higher of the two flood elevations, whether it's the FEMA elevation or the DEP adopted flood study. And that's why we asked Mr. Hollows to just show provide us the information for the higher of the two elevations, the more restrictive of the two components. He did provide me data that showed they compared with both, but in our professional opinion, any engineer working on a DEP project would be required to use the higher elevation, which Mr. Hollows did.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Thornton. Yes, Jonathan.
I'm not sure whether we're allowed to ask, but I'm wondering, is 220 the building that Mr. Thornton owns? Is that the building on the corner of that we've been discussing?
No, that's the building to the right he owns, that new one.
That's the north of the property.
The nice looking one to the north.
Okay, I just wondered. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Not the ugly one.
Yeah, not the big ugly white one.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Zelli, do you have any additional testimony?
I have no further witnesses, no further testimony. We thank you all for hearing us.
Now, members of the public, you have an opportunity now to give us your statements.
Sworn.
Mr. Wentowitz.
Charles, we're going to swear you
Yes,
in.
I'd like to get sworn in for my testimony.
Go ahead.
Certainly, and Mr. Aronowitz, even though I believe I know the answers, I'm constrained under the municipal land use law to ask. Will you turn on your video so I can see you raise your right hand and properly swear you in?
Well, I've got my camera on.
No, she can't. She would have to make him a panelist.
I'd have to promote him to panelist in order to do that. So if that would, hold on.
I got both hands raised right now.
All right, we'll take his word for it that he's raising his right hand.
Well, I'll defer to the law on that, and I'll swear you in. Otherwise, I won't render a legal opinion. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to God or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
So help me God, I do.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aronowitz. To the extent you were just sworn in, please give your name and address and provide your sworn testimony.
My name is Charles Aronowitz. That's spelled Arentowiczz. I live at 605 Heritage Road, Millington, New Jersey, for the past 4 years.
Thank you.
I'm going to read from the September 28th, 2021 agenda for the planning board. It states, quote, Elite Properties at Long Hill Township LLC. The residential buildings will consist of 62 units, 9 of which are proposed to be reserved for affordable housing. I'll now read from the Morris County tax records from my search. The property is block number 10801, lot 0003. The property location is 617-621 Valley Road. Land description, 5.150 acres. Have a degree in mathematics. And I did a division of 62 units divided by 5.15 acres equals 12.03 acres. I'm sorry, 12.3 units per acre. I do not believe that there are anywhere in this town approved for 14 units per acre. It doesn't exist in this township the past 40 years when I've living here. I'll now submit the questions.
Okay. I don't think there was testimony that anything was approved.
I said it was an application.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean approved.
I didn't say it got approved.
Okay. You said you didn't think there was any approved. And we're not saying that there was an approved 14.
What was testified is there are permitted 14 plus units per acre as testified by the applicant's planner, and I'm refuting that testimony.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I
Yes,
asked
go
for
ahead.
her, that planner, to produce those documents for this board.
Okay, but what direct correlation does it have for this application?
You're asking for a variance on the densities of this town. They're under 12 units per acre. This applicant is asking for 13 units per acre.
Okay, so they're asking for the variance, what they
That
have
is
to do.
correct, and I'm saying there is no complex that's under consideration that's beyond 12 units an acre.
That's fine, okay.
Any questions for me?
Does
I
any
have a
board
question
member have a
for Mr.
question? of
Ivanowitz,
that?
yes.
I'll ask a question.
Okay, Jerry, go ahead.
So can you clarify your testimony, and can you make a statement that there is no complex in Long Hill Township that exceeds the density of 12 units per acre at the current moment?
No, I cannot testify that because there's one unit, one complex in this town that's larger than 12.
You want to elaborate on that? Tell us where and when.
Sure, I'll tell you where it is. It's Sterling Manor, Summer Street in Sterling.
Somerset, yeah.
It's 4.438 acres. And the density is 13.52.
Okay, and that was built in accommodation to affordable housing regulations that were in effect at that time. Do you know about that?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay.
All right, well, any
Thank
other
you.
questions? Okay, hearing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
is it possible to take a quick break here, bio break?
Sure, it's 9 o'clock. Yes, let's take a 5-minute break.
I need an aspirin.
Let's go to till 9:10. We'll come back at 9:10. All right.
You got it.
All right. Thank you, Tom.
Is my sound better, Ed?
No, you're still coming. All right.
Mr. Chairman, can we get a quick roll call, confirm we have all our board members?
Yes. Okay.
Mr. Ronio,
Here.
Mr. Giannakis,
Here.
Mr. Grosskopf,
Here.
Mr. Malloy is excused, Mr. Rosenberg,
Here.
Mr. Hain,
Here.
Ms. Robertson is excused, Vice Chairman Johnson,
Here.
and Chairman Grant.
Yes. Here. All right. We are present and accounted for. All right. So, Mr. Zelli, would you?
Wait, we have another member of the public to testify.
Oh, we do. Okay, I'm sorry.
Mr. Patrick Thornton.
All right, Mr. Thornton, would you mind being sworn in, please?
Well, I didn't think, I was just going to make a Am I allowed to make a closing statement? Is that acceptable?
If
Yeah,
you get
it's
sworn in, yeah, you have to
testimony.
get
I
sworn in.
Yeah, still have to swear you in.
All right,
To the extent
okay.
I can.
I'm happy to be sworn in. That's not a problem.
Thank you.
If I could, a procedural question. You know, I heard the numbers on the 70% rule that we talked about, and I'm not disputing them at all. But am I allowed to ask just one more clarifying question? And the point is
Sure.
to see
Sure.
whether or not 142-1A now applies. Mr. Hollows, just bear with me, okay? Was your calculation numerator like 7,040, 7,050? I didn't catch the exact number that went into the 64 to 65% calculation. Do you remember what it was? You're on mute, sir.
7,271.
Okay, okay. And the denominator was around in the 11,000 area. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, on the site plan, it says that the proposed coverage is 15,839 feet. So if
Some of that's in the critical area.
well, that's right. That's right. And that's not covered. Let me know if this is testimony, but that's not covered by 142.1.c. Then you have to go up to 142.1a, where that ordinance says no part of a parking area, a building, or an accessory structure can be in a critical area.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is correct, and that is one of the ordinances I believe we need.
That's right. So therefore, at a minimum, you would need a variance from the board under 142.1a.
Right, and that was requested at the beginning of the hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just for clarification, Mr. Chairman, that's always been a variance for Mr.
Yes.
Thornton's benefit. It was C that was removed, apparently, not as unnecessary. A was
Okay.
always noticed and asked for as a
Okay.
variance.
Okay. All right. That's fine. So that request for the variance is before the board.
Yes.
That's one of
Okay.
the ones that's still before the board.
Thank you very
correct?
much. Thank you. That answered my question. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay. So now you want to swear me in, making
As
a
best I can, even though I can't
Raise
see
your
you, raise
right
your
hand.
right hand.
Okay,
Please
I'm
raise
raising
your
my right hand, sir.
Yep. Do you swear to God or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. And your name and
Proceed.
address one more time for the record.
Okay, it's Patrick Thornton, and it's 50 Camptown Drive in Berkeley Heights.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Okay. First of all, I want to thank the board attorney, board engineer, and the planners for the thorough review of the application and the testimony. And as I said at the last meeting, I want to repeat my support for the project. The testimony clearly establishes that the project will have positive impact. Okay, and as the board moves to deliberate on the application and the reliefs sought, I offer the following. With respect to the variances, I defer to the board and the experts and advisors on whether to grant them or not. I'm not raising any citizen objections to any of the variances. Okay. With respect to the question of whether to give preliminary or final site approval at this time, all I ask is that regardless of which path you choose, that the board include a condition that the relevant engineer certify that the water retention system to be installed will have no adverse effect or impact on the adjoining property. And I think that's one of the negative criteria to be overcome, if I understand it correctly. So I'm just asking for that condition, that whatever they put in there, that the engineer says, look, it's not going to impact negatively any of the adjoining properties. Nothing more, nothing less. End of testimony.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thornton. If I'm not mistaken, Steve, wouldn't that have to be one of the conditions anyway, to the drainage? I mean, they can't adversely affect, I mean, the whole testimony was that their retention system is supposed to keep it on their property.
Well, rather than characterize their testimony, and I think Mr. Keller can probably confirm this with more specificity, but I believe generally, if there's no increase in the rate or volume of flow of stormwater runoff off the property, I believe that's generally the standard to be satisfied, but and I believe any stormwater management and or grading would be subject to the approval of the plans themselves. The further refined plans would be subject to the review and approval of our engineering department. But notwithstanding all that, maybe I should defer to our engineer, Mr. Keller, to confirm that, hopefully.
Rich, that's correct, right?
That is correct. And the requirements within our memo are that they provide more detail of the grading plan. And at that point, whether it's our office or the township engineer's office, they'll review that to make sure there's no surface flow impacts. So just to meet resolution compliance, if the board were to approve it, there'll be additional controls in place to make sure there's no surface runoff. As was indicated by Mr. Warner, the detention system also needs some additional tweaking, but it's basically been designed to reduce the rate of runoff and direct it away from any adjoining properties. And there's enough detail for us to get a comfort level that system will work. They will need to do some testing, but they weren't really relying on groundwater recharge anyways. They were relying on gravity of the system. So I think that the board and the next door neighbor also, I don't believe, has a basement. And we're far enough away that there shouldn't be the detention system is far enough away, shouldn't have any adverse impact. So there are safeguards already in place if any condition approval would be to comply with all of the requirements in our technical review dated November 14, 2021.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
And the applicant stipulated to all that already, correct, Mr. Zelli?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. I think, Mr. Zelli, do you have any closing statements?
Just briefly, and I know I'm a lawyer and you never believe me when I say that, but I'm actually going to try to keep it brief. I think Ms. McManus did an excellent job in covering the positive and negative criterion and the overall planning aspects of it. So I just want to focus on some real practicality of this application, which of course, we're dealing with two buildings now that they've lived their lives. These buildings need to come down. They are certainly not a benefit to the neighborhood as they are now. And we're offering to present a new building that will not only be state of the art, but will be aesthetically pleasing and will be very much a positive contribution to this neighborhood. It will be in keeping both architecturally and I think in scale. Yes, it will be one of the larger buildings on the strip, no question about that. But the lot can accommodate it. And it is set back decently, which contributes to minimize any impact of the size. Also, the architectural design of it in and of itself, the variations in the front facade work to that advantage as well. And point out that the facade of the main box of the building is even further back, since we do have the porch feature on this building. I think we're continuing a nice trend that was started by Mr. Thornton in building his building. And hopefully the building on the other side, maybe that neighbor will follow suit and do something nice with their property to the existing building, or maybe replace it as we're doing. We're providing a need, which is rental units. As you know, with the millennials and so forth, this is a growing trend and more in demand. We're right next to the train station. We have the whole village transit concept contributing to that. And even though we're not required to provide affordable housing, we are providing 2 units, and they're family units. We're looking for 1 unit to be larger than is required under the zone, and that's so that we can have a 3-bedroom unit for a family. Again, we need the use variance in order to have it on the first floor. But as we discussed before, and as I pointed out before, we are meeting the intent and the spirit of the ordinance by having our commercial on the first floor fronting the street. Certainly from the street, you're not even going to realize that there's apartments behind that section. And what are the apartments adjacent to? The apartments are adjacent to another high density area of the Sterling Manor, which I believe Mr. Ronowitz just testified to is an even higher density than we're seeking. The other thing I would point out, and I understand that there is no precedent per se in land use, but you did recently grant the Rocker application on Plainfield Road for virtually identical density. I believe it was 12.83. We're at 12.97 or so. Virtually identical. That's a larger building. So there is precedent in the general sense of the town seeing a need for these types of units. I think our application is even stronger than that one in the sense because we are right next to the train station. So you have a situation where singles or young couples working in the city will desire this kind of an apartment and be able to jump right on the train, not use cars. That's a green situation there. So overall, it's a very positive application. There's really no detriment in the global scheme of things to this building. And we think that's a positive contribution to the neighborhood. For all of those reasons and for all of the specific planning reasons that Ms. McManus gave you, I'd ask you to please vote in favor of this application. We appreciate your time over these 3 meetings and your patience, and we appreciate a positive vote. Thank you so much.
Steve, would you give us a brief resolution?
Certainly, the motion will either be to grant or deny the following in the relief I have, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Liz and/or Bill. Excuse me, Rich. The preliminary and final site plan approval and a merger or lot consolidation, either by way of relief or condition of approval, as well as a D1 use variance for the non-permitted use not complying with all of the requirements. I'll use the term requirements, not conditions list, and a height variance, both in stories and in feet. Those 2 height variances are bulk C variances, not D6 variances, and no parking deviation required either by way of variance from the ordinance or RSIS waiver. There is a development permit application approval requirement, and there is still, as Mr. Thornton correctly pointed out, a variance required for parking in a critical area. I believe that's all the relief. Liz and/or Rich, please correct me if I'm wrong.
I think you got everything.
Okay.
Can you second that, Rich?
I do.
Thanks, I'll take it. I have a list of conditions of approval. I can abbreviate the list. In the event, obviously, it's a motion to grant. And the list I have are all the conditions set forth in the planner's memo of November 12th, the engineer's memo, November 14th, all outside agency approvals, including but not limited to NJDEP individual permits, landscape species subject to approval by our engineering department, no light spillage onto adjacent properties, downward directed and lights and cutoffs, stormwater management and grading plan subject to review and approval of our engineering department, additional landscape plantings near the ADA compliant parking spaces subject to review and approval of engineering. Have to apologize. I believe the condition may have been alerted by Vice Chairman Johnson, but I had soft, it looked like porch lighting and dormers subject to review and approval of engineering.
That's accurate.
Yes.
Okay.
The decorative lighting in the front of the building for a soft.
Okay, okay. My handwriting gets a C-, not an F. Architectural plans will control as to discrepancies between dimensions vis-a-vis the site plans. Flood elevation line delineated on plans and contours boulder on plans ultimately to be approved. UHAC requirements satisfied as to affordable housing units. Commercial space will stay at least at the magnitude, square footage, floor area as proposed, and will remain along the frontage as opposed to the rear of the structure. There will be no doctors' offices and or restaurants, but any other permitted uses, including but not limited to office uses, may continue at the location. The The plan set will be revised to include but not be limited to revised non-critical area impervious coverage calculation at 214.5 foot elevation. And the board has the leeway to impose a condition that the applicant's planner testified would have a nexus and not be arbitrary and capricious, which is if the board so chooses, they can impose the condition of a second egress, emergency egress, to the extent same can be accomplished in a compliant fashion vis-a-vis all required approved officials, including but not limited to fire official and engineering. I'm sorry, fire official and building code. Those are all the conditions I had. If there is a grant of the approval, unless there's any others that I missed, I just want to remind the board that, as the board is fully aware already, there is a D variance at issue here. The application is being presented in its entirety, so it would require 5 out of the 7 qualified members to vote in the affirmative to pass.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to move that?
You
Do I hear a
want to
motion?
deliberate first,
No,
Mr. Chairman?
deliberate.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're right. It's a long night. Sorry. Okay. Would you like to start the deliberations, Brian?
Sure, thank you. So I want to thank the applicant and the board. I know this has been a long path, and you've all done a great job, and appreciate everyone's dedication to this. This is a unique application. It has a lot of positives and has some concerns as well. For the going down the list for the height variance, I think that's a reasonable request for the aesthetics of the building. The small amount is at the ridge of the building wouldn't really be detectable from the street. For the flood zone development, I think it's consistent with the area where it's being developed. I think engineering testimony indicated that it would not exacerbate the flooding condition and would retain the water on site as it is. And for the housing unit over 1,000 square feet, I think we had some good testimony from the planner that that's appropriate for affordable housing. And then also from the planner, I think many of our points were well taken in that it's close to public transit, which can support a more intense use on the site. However, I think the points she's making are really something more for the planning board to consider in their view of the master plan and the zones that they established. In particular, they established that the ground floor should not expressly not have residential, and whereas 2 stories are allowed, 3 are proposed, and the units per acre at 13 or 5 are proposed speak to an intensity of use on the site that's not particularly envisioned for the zone. And so while I'm not opposed to the use per se, I do have concerns about the intensity, and for that reason, I'm not in favor.
Okay. Jonathan.
I want to echo the vice chairman's thanks to all the participants and everyone involved. I think one thing we can all agree upon is that the proposed project is definitely an improvement over what is currently on the site, and that it just that face value, the project would be definitely a benefit to the area. But that's not necessarily the only thing we have to consider. I think in terms, as Vice Chairman mentioned, in terms of the height variance, it's kind of a negligible amount of above above the required amount height. So I think that doesn't really have an effect on it. I think what I have had the most issue in trying to get wrap my head around in terms of the size and mass of this building is how it would appear in the neighborhood, and would it look and feel much different than what is existing there. And I think from my own personal knowledge and from the testimony that has been presented, as well as some of the other things in the area, particularly behind, and I know the vice chairman had mentioned that there is a reason this was planned to be, the density and use was planned for this zone, but it does neighbor in other other properties that have much higher density and are used for more, have more residential units than this zone would allow for. So while I agree that it wasn't planned necessarily this way, I think that my understanding of how large the building would be, but how the appearance would make it look not as massive, and the fact that it borders on other properties that do provide for larger amounts of residential density, I think I would be supportive of this in that regard. In terms of the other variances regarding the parking and the size of the unit, I think that there was a mention of the fact that these are handicap units as well, handicap or accessible units, which also begs that these units be a little larger than normal. So I think that would satisfy that for myself. So I would be supportive for all those reasons. I would be supportive of this application.
Thank you, Jonathan. Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everyone. This has been a long, hard process, as we all know. We just heard two opinions that sounded in argument or in discussion right up next to each other. Well, one went yes, one went no, and I'm still struggling with that myself. At first blush, when I read over all the plans and everything, and I thought this is going to be a huge building right on Main Ave, and it may seem out of place. Then I thought about the benefit of the building, where, as Jonathan just mentioned, handicapped accessible downstairs, although the one apartment is oversized. I can still be persuaded by the discussion that we're having. I'm glad to know there won't be a restaurant downstairs or a doctor's office. For one reason is the fire I'd be afraid of, and of course fire department approval separate from ours. But it is, as for the building height, with the cupolas, or not cupolas, but the dormers on top, so that it doesn't look like a 3-story building. And if I'm to look at other buildings in town, I look at the building next to the Ancona restaurant, which is 3 stories plus a cupola. So it's not unfounded in this town, but it is for this area. But yet from the street, it wouldn't look that way. There's a garden apartment behind it, so it's not as if it's overlooking somebody's backyard and their swimming pool. Travel to the city is perfect. Young professionals being there would be great. Having people who could walk to the downtown restaurants in Sterling, that's wonderful. As of right now, I will give you, I'm 50.5 to 49.5 in favor.
Thank you. Thank you. Scott, I'll let you go next. What do you got to say?
Okay. I moved to this town 25 years ago because I love the small town. I do understand the buildings they're looking to combine and get rid of. They are a detriment. I looked at the architect's design of the building they're looking to put in place, which it's a 3-story building, but you go from the street and it does not look that way because they have 2 dormers. They brought the roof back up, so it does not give the appeal of a 3-story apartment building, which I do appreciate that. Considering that the Sterling Hotel is across the street, which has been there forever. I think it would be great to get rid of the 2 almost abandoned buildings. I say almost because I know there is still some residency in one building, and it would clean up the area. I do agree that it would be great for young millennials that they could take, these apartments and go right into the city. So I don't think that's a detriment. I think it could be approval. I'm not in favor of large buildings coming into our town because I like the small town feeling. But I do think in this certain situation, this could be an asset, not a detriment. So in that reason, I am in favor of it.
Thank you. Gary?
So I appreciate also the time that it took to bring this application forward to us. And I know that a lot of questions have been asked and answered. I think that rather than go through the different requests for relief that are being asked, at the end, we can't say, well, we like a little bit of this and we like a little bit of that. Although that's what deliberating is all about. I'm inclined to vote in favor of this application. Kind of echoing where Scott is with this. And although I'm listening to Vice Chairman Johnson on a lot of the things that he's spoken about, that's where I'm netting out on this thing, whether it's 51 to 49 or whatever, but that's where I am right now. So I appreciate anyone else having more input than that.
Thank you, Gary. Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first of all, I think it would be a great benefit to have a project similar to this in that neighborhood. That area we know is in definite need of some beautification and enhancement, and this would positively enrich that area without a doubt. I can't go into the future of mass transit. I know right now it's dismal. It doesn't even run on weekends, so I wouldn't really hang my hat on, transit village and all that model theory. But New Jersey desperately needs housing. We know that. And it's nice to live on a street like Main Avenue in Sterling. It's a quaint little town. Hopefully we can build it up nicely. However, I think this project is just a little bit too large in scale for the smallish scale of Main Avenue. We do have that bigger building. We all talked about that to the south, the one on the corner of Somerset Street. That's been there forever. There were no architectural standards at the time that was built, right? We wish there were, but there weren't. So we shouldn't penalize this property owner for that. But what we can do is, keep things that are in the character of that part of town. So in the character and scale of that neighborhood, I would say that 3 stories is too large. 2.5 stories, I would compromise on that. It looks like 2.5 stories, but it's still exceeding our height variance. I'm not in favor of that generally anywhere that happens. And the reason why, we just heard, the professionals for the applicant will tell us that we've done this somewhere else. We did it on Plainfield Avenue, and what happens in Gillette with the affordable housing and the density. We are not a precedent-setting board, but yet every single applicant comes to us and points at the last application that was approved, and they're a few inches higher, a few units denser, or something like that. But the growth of the projects continues to go higher. I understand that you want to maximize the every inch of your real estate, and you should try to do that. But I think that this is just a little bit too much. I think the towns around us that have developed ahead of us have made some mistakes where you have these looming large buildings overlooking their either Main Avenue or their downtown or Springfield Avenue and Berkeley Heights. And you look and you say, why did they put that there? So I don't want to be the guy that says, why did I allow that to be built there? So for that reason, I cannot be in favor of this application. If it were a slightly smaller scale, I would definitely be in favor of it. But that's where I stand on this right now. So as it is right now, I would say no, based on the density, number of units in the area, the height in stories and in feet. But everything else I'm in favor of.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
Did I miss anybody? No, okay.
I only have 6 people. Oh, yourself. I'm sorry. Of course.
No, I missed myself. I'm just saying, did I miss anybody else? Okay. No, I feel similar to what everybody said. I too have had some reservations about the size of the building. I do understand what is there is an atrocity. It's one of the areas of the town that has to be cleaned up. There's a lot of areas of town that's in need of that. I am not as opposed to the building as some of the other board members. I think that it's a decent design. I understand the need for a third floor to get more residential. It doesn't look like a third-story building, a three-story building from the street. It is set back more than the building that's there. I don't think it will have a looming quality to it. Once it's built, I think it'll look like a house. I think it'll be very, very aesthetic to that area, and maybe it will inspire that corner property to improve. I would be in favor of it for the reasons already stated, and I think that it is a benefit for the town to have that building. I don't think it's as looming as it would appear to be if it was a straight three-story square building. I think it has some nice curves and shapes to it and angles that will offset that loominess effect. So I would be in favor of it.
Thank you.
Okay, you want to do a roll call?
Mr. Chairman, the first thing we need to clarify, of course, is it a motion? What is the motion in the second, to grant or
yes,
deny?
right,
It may
okay.
be a motion to grant based upon the deliberations, and it may or may not have the requisite 5 votes for passage. We'll find out.
Do I hear a motion to grant this application as stated by?
May I ask a question, please?
Yes.
At this time, if the motion is denied, do we have the ability to speak to the applicant about lowering the height of the building? Or it's just yay or nay as is?
Well, first thing is we'll need to know exactly what the motion is to grant. And there is one condition that I'm going to assume it's with all stipulated to conditions. There was one that you may or may not want to impose as far as a secondary egress if compliant. But putting all that aside, once a motion is seconded, you are voting yay or nay. But you just made a statement. So if the chair wants to afford the applicant an opportunity to continue to push forward to get the vote or not, I guess that's something that can be done.
Fred,
That's the chair's discretion.
What do you feel about?
If I understood Mr. Grosskopf's question, he's asking specifically about the height, not the stories, but the height. Is that accurate?
Yes. So it appears. So there was discussion about it could come down a few feet, and it would meet the total height requirement. I believe that's correct.
We're 11 inches, just shy of a foot too high. Bear in mind that that's largely because of the way your ordinance is structured, as opposed to being on the average, it's below 4. If that weren't the case, if your ordinance followed the more typical scenario, we actually wouldn't need this variance. And the testimony from the architect as
well, no, I'm going to, Mr. Chairman, maybe Mr. Zelli shouldn't be making further arguments since we closed the case.
Yeah,
but
no,
I think
I'm
the question is
looking
what, if
for
any,
arguments.
modification does
I
he wish to
understand.
make?
I was leading up to a suggestion.
Okay.
Which is based upon the reasoning and the fact that we know that we could lower it, but there were reasons advanced in testimony why that would not be a great idea. What I would ask, if possibly, we could have a straw poll just on that issue, and if it seems that the board would prefer us to have the lower height, I could certainly speak with my client briefly offline and respond accordingly.
Okay.
But we'd certainly want to know if that's the predominant.
I'm willing to do that because that might be, yes, Jonathan.
I mean, I don't want to speak for other people. I've heard the testimony of some of the other people on the board. It seems as if that is not necessarily the issue of people, I mean, of board members, and that I'd be surprised myself if that changed anyone's mind one way, flew anyone one way or the other, just over 11 inches. But maybe I'm wrong.
Straw poll. Would the 11-inch reduction in the height of the building change any of the negative votes to a positive vote?
No.
No.
Jerry?
No.
Okay, so that's a moot
Wouldn't
point.
change my mind either way either.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Asked and answered.
Okay. So do I hear a motion to approve the application?
If I could just like go back to the last thing, I mean, you know, I'm hung up on the 2.5 versus 3 stories. We have 2.5 stories elsewhere. We don't generally approve 3. I mean, I know it's been done for the affordable housing in Millington, but I'd like to know, like, first of all, what is the difference between 2.5 and 3? This building, to me, architecturally, looks like 2.5 from the front and the back. Can someone talk to me about that? I know the architect's not here, but that's what one of my,
It's the amount of
hung
residential.
up on that a little bit too.
It's the amount of residential apartments they would have in it. They'd have to eliminate 2 of the apartments on the 3rd floor.
I know, but right,
The
our planner
residential's on the
said
first
that
floor.
in that zone, it's zoned for 2. Other parts of our business districts, we have 2.5 zoning, right? I just want to talk a little bit about that and like what determines a story. Is it the height of the walls on the building above 2 stories, or
Liz,
what is
what determines a story?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, before we go on, if it's going to be beyond deliberations, we have to reopen the application. You
All right,
can't
well,
have
let's reopen
testimony
it then.
from Liz
All
Laney
right,
or
I don't
anyone
want to
else
hold it up. I'm
during
sorry. I'll
deliberations.
withdraw my question. I don't want to hold up the application for that.
Well, I mean, it's important if it means something to you, Jerry. I don't want to, you know.
It does, but if I don't want it to hold up the applicant. If they want us to vote, I'm fine with that.
Well, okay, but you know,
It's discretionary. It's discretionary.
They may want you to understand it better if it changes your
Okay,
vote.
fair
Or
enough.
doesn't change your
I'll
vote.
pursue it. If it's not going to kill everybody's evening, I'll go ahead.
Quick question,
Please
does it
do.
mean interior or exterior when you're talking about heights of buildings?
Liz?
Well, it's the exterior. Let me just read, if you allow me to read the definitions of half story and a story ordinance. A half story is any finished space, and in this instance, under a gable, hip, gambrel, or other sloping roof, which has a ceiling height of 7.5 feet or more for no more than 50% of its total floor area. So any space with a ceiling height of 7.5 feet or more, for more than 50% of the floor area, that's considered a full story.
Okay.
And that's exterior, interior, that's just.
Interior.
In that instance, it's interior, it's the interior 7.5 feet, like
Got
you
you.
experience in the space. Yep.
Thank you. And
So the front would
assume
qualify
that
as a
they
2.5,
know the
but the
definition.
rear would be 3, right, on this building?
Right.
So it's almost like a half a 3rd floor.
Well, it's like 2.5 married with a half, with 3.
Right.
So is it 2.5 or is it 3?
Well, it's
Where's the 50%? Correct?
It's 3. For this application, it's 3.
It's
Thank
3.
you.
It's 3. Okay. Does that help, Jerry?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
It doesn't
All
change
right,
my opinion, but it helps.
Okay, good. Okay.
So we're back to needing a motion, Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Do I hear a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Before we go any further, you got to clarify, Board Member Rosenberg, is that motion with the imposition of the second egress condition or without it?
I would defer to Tom on that one. Since you were the one who brought it up, I'd defer to you on whether you would prefer that. I could go either way. I don't care really.
I would include it. I fear for people, if we're discussing this as a 3rd story, I fear for people on the 3rd story coming down and needing to find a way out. So,
okay, so
I would include it.
Put it in.
Yes, include it.
Okay, we have a clear motion now. It's with all stipulated 2 conditions and the 1 imposed condition, and it's to grant. And we're waiting for a second.
We had a second.
Mr. Grosskopf was the second.
Right, I wanted to make sure the second came after the clarification. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh,
We have a motion and a second. We're ready for a roll call vote, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Deborah.
Mr. Rosenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Grosskopf,
Yes.
Mr. Aronio,
No.
Mr. Giannakis,
Yes.
Mr. Hain,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Johnson,
No.
Chairman Correct,
Yes.
motion carries 5-2.
All right,
Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience, being with us, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. I
Good
think
luck.
you wrote a
Thank
record
you.
with how many times you've come before us.
Yeah.
Thank you,
well,
everyone.
A
We
lot of
appreciate
those
it.
were not physical.
No, I know, but it's still a long, I had to take a breath in between each one of those dates.
You did. It was a long process, but I think we got
Long
it right.
process, but thank you. And I appreciate everyone's opinion. I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you all. Thank you, everybody, for.
This was a tough one, and to the applicant, make us proud.
Yeah, it's gonna look beautiful when we're done. I promise you that.
Thank
know
you.
that. Good luck.
Maybe,
Thank you.
maybe you can buy the property on a corner that everybody's complaining about.
I tried. They weren't interested in selling.
Ah, too bad. All right. All right. Do we have any other business?
No, except for just, we're gonna be, I'm just grateful that we've had Casey and Keller on for the time
Yeah.
that we've had them, Mr. Chairman. and
Yes.
This is Rich's last meeting.
Rich.
Thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
Rich.
Rich,
Thank
we're going to
you,
miss you
Rich.
as well on applicant side. I can tell you that.
Yeah, thank you for your efforts and your dedication and your knowledge and your skill. We appreciate it.
Thank you, board
And,
members. It's been a pleasure serving you all, and I look forward to seeing you one of these times at the Sterling Hotel or one of the other fine restaurants in town that I've actually come to love and enjoy. When I first got hired, I decided to cycle the entire town over a 3-month period. So Long Hill's kind of part of my blood, and I appreciate all of your kind words, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve you guys.
Rich, we'll have to get together and give you a good send off when we can get this all COVID stuff, maybe a little bit settled down. We'll have to go to one of your favorite restaurants that you tried.
I would love that, even though Tom Grosskopf said he's going to still kick me in the shins and call me a flat lever.
I still like you.
No, I mean, we gave Yolanda a send off. We have to do the same for you.
Well, great. I would love it. I would love to get over this COVID thing, and then certainly would love to have the opportunity to
Well,
socialize with you
I'll
guys.
definitely keep in touch with you. I'll have to do that. All right.
Best of luck in the new year. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
And the only other thing that I have to remind everybody is that next, in 2 weeks, on the 18th, we have the fabulous reorganizational meeting. So hopefully all on the board can attend.
Yes.
And we will have 35 Morristown Avenue. And then I believe in February, February 1st, we're looking to hopefully start 44 Plainfield Road, the Jonathan Rocker application for their site plan.
Lovely. I'm looking forward to the neighbor testifying. But I also want to, say farewell to other board members that are leaving, Jill and the other gentleman. And I just wish that they would have stuck around, I mean, sorry to lose people. We're getting 2 new people. So they'll start next meeting. And it's just, it's sad when you lose people that's been around. So, all right. People, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned at 9:59.
All right.
you.
Good night,
Happy New Year.
everybody. Thank
Bye,
you.
Rich.
Yeah, everyone.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you again, guys.
Happy New Year.
Bye-bye. Happy New Year.